of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. All right, item number 2 is the approval of the minutes for the May 18th, 2022 special meeting, the May 23rd, 2022 meeting, the May 25th, 2022 special meeting, and the May 31st, 2022 special meeting.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any amendments or changes to the minutes? No? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I will abstain actually from the May 18th, the 25th, and the 35th meetings. Okay, item number 3.
Aye.
Oh, Scott, you've joined us. So item number 3 is just a quick update from my office. I guess a couple things is something that will be coming to the board soon is, we talked about the electric vehicle program that we were putting together to take advantage of some grant opportunities in terms of installing infrastructure for electric vehicles. So we've actually received some proposals. Last week, an RFP was put out for kind of a plan around town, and then we'll come back to the board once we've reviewed those proposals with an actual kind of plan. But this gave us a better sense of what the cost of the infrastructure would be and what was practical. So we'll be coming back to the board soon with kind of a more detailed plan on EV. The other thing is the town did receive another grant. Aaron Mannix, congratulations for receiving, I think it was over $200,000 for Academy for brownfields assessment study to help us determine any hazardous materials and things like that related to the site. So that we received from DECD. And really, that's kind of it for now. I'll keep my comments short this morning. Any liaison reports or selectmen comments?
I'll just update you a little bit with our American Recovery Plan grants. We've got a great team. Al and I have been part of it. This past week, we had our first meeting where we invited potential groups that would apply for grants. And just to hear about the process, it's taken us this long to actually get a process that we all felt was fair and would reach the community. So I think we put August 1st as our, not a deadline because it's a rolling thing, but I think we're going to start looking and recommending some grants around beginning August 1st. Of course, if something comes up that needs immediate attention, we'll certainly bring that to your attention also. And the only other thing, I have a question. I saw in the paper that we received a grant for a land up off of Green Hill Road. Was that given to the town, or from the article, I couldn't tell, was it the town or was it to the land trust?
I can speak to that, Noreen. That is a grant from the department from DEEP directly to the land trust, $583,000 to acquire property at Green Hill Road and the town line there. It's directly across the street from the land trust's existing properties, which we call the Paper Mill Trail. It's frontage along the river.
I saw the article. I forgot it was that big, but that large of a piece. But it's a great grant to keep your organization continue to do their work. But when I read the article, the patch, I guess, or wherever, it made it sound like it was being given to the town. And I know that's a little different than the way the trust usually works. So thanks for the clarification. That's all I have.
I think it was probably relating to the fact that the town supported, we provided support letters for the grant application, but that was just typical for these. So any other selectmen comments or liaison reports?
Yeah, at the recent EDC meeting, they took up the discussion about what their priority is going to be in the upcoming fiscal year, and what rose to the top of the conversation is the second platform at the train station in Madison, and how important that would be for economic development. And they inquired as to whether or not the Board of Selectmen can take a lead in that. And my suggestion was that we, as the Board of Selectmen, we endorse and do whatever we can, Peggy, from your office, but that we would support their efforts to create awareness and urgency with our state legislators, and see if we can't make this all happen. They may be reaching out to your office to get some more background about the land, the wetlands, the land swap, the history of the project, to uncover what the obstacles have been, in the hopes that maybe they can devise a path to see this through. Seeing as how we're now the redheaded stepchild of the shoreline and the only town that doesn't have a platform.
So that has been certainly very much front of mind for me over since I came into this office, and we've had several conversations with Deep about it. We actually had a meeting earlier actually it was last year, about the issues with we met at this train station with Deep officials and Senator Cohen. The project was flagged again in last year's budget. I think now we just have to figure out how we address the problems with the environmental issues, because one of the things is they've changed the requirements for stations now. So the original plans for the station are going to have to change. You now have to have 2 elevators. So you have a backup elevator, which means it's a bigger footprint, and it's going to require a revision to the original plans that had been drawn up, 15 years ago. So, that's all been in discussion. But I do think that, we need to continue to beat the drum. I mean, I spoke to the commissioner, transportation commissioner, when I was on the electric train ride directly about this, but agreed it's an important thing and should be a priority for us. So the more voices, the better, right? To support it. So.
May I ask you a question? We've been on in the many times, and we always get bumped in. That's the inner workings of Hartford. I don't know, but is the 2-tiered parking still part of it, or has that been broken off? Do you know?
Well, I don't think they've made any changes to what was originally done 15 years ago, but it was a phased project from my understanding. And so right now the discussion is primarily focused on the station itself.
And when you drive by now, I mean, I'm kind of amazed at how the low amount of cars when you drive by. Ever since COVID's somewhat over, people are back to work, and the number is just remarkable how low it looks. So I don't know. We'd have to certainly work with the state to take a look to see if we really even need a double-decker parking for that area. I don't see it. I don't know if it's ever filled up.
Yeah, I think right now ridership in general is still really low on Shoreline East. We haven't seen a full recovery, because even like some of the major employers in New Haven still aren't fully operating with people in person. Yale is not, and the hospitals aren't. That will be a longer term discussion. You're right about what the parking needs would be, but I think the goal right now is just to at least, as Bruce put it, that we're the poor stepchild here without the only one on the shoreline. So the service is even more restricted to what is already limited service.
Well, I'm glad you read here stepchild out. Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the obstacles from 15 years ago was an issue of swapping of wetlands, that the second station platform might or might not impose on some wetlands. And at that time, the town was being pressured to come up with alternate wetlands that could be saved in exchange for intruding upon the wetlands where the station is. Is that still an issue?
Yes, it is. And I think it's even more now. And so I've talked with our town planner about, we're going to have to start looking at what those opportunities would be. So I think it's 1 to 3, I want to say. So for every acre of wetland, you need to offset 3 acres of wetland. So that is something that is, I think there's a view, at least when we had this meeting last year, that we would be able to manage that. And I know Aaron's going to be looking at what opportunities there would be to do that. But there's just a lot of complications. I mean, things have just gotten more strict relating
Yeah.
to wetlands than where they were 15 years ago. So, and that obviously will add to the cost. And so the whole site has to be re-reviewed. And then, like I said, the whole design of the platform and everything has to be redone because the requirements have changed. So,
And I
Would it make sense, Peggy? Just, it seems like this is sort of a robust conversation right now, and it's not a topic on our agenda today. Could we put it on our next agenda and just have a focused conversation on it?
yeah,
Good.
yeah, we can certainly do that. I think that makes sense. Question, Bruce, on just other updates, the marijuana committee, because I know that we have this moratorium, or the P&Z has a moratorium expiring in August. Is there an update on the committee, any actions or things that the board should be doing?
No. This is back on me for now. So I've got to get the committee back together. We've not met for several weeks now, but I'm starting to get good information in from the town departments, and I think we're going to be ready to begin moving forward again here in the very near future. So I have every faith that we'll get this resolved before August. I was originally hoping for this month. Although worst case, I think the P&Z can just elect to extend that moratorium at their discretion. So although it's a deadline, it's not a deadline carved in stone. But I don't want them to have to extend it.
Right. Okay. So I'll just look to you, then you'll come forward if we need to put this on the next agenda or two, because I know I think we only have one scheduled meeting in July and August, that's all. So things we can always do special meetings. I'm sure we're going to have to, but just keeping it in mind. Any other selectmen comments or updates?
We had our last Madison Youth and Family meeting of the year with a celebration down at the Surf Club with the entire staff, which was quite nice. So much appreciation to Scott Cochran and all his staff for coming out and spending a little time with the board. It was great. Even in the rain, it was sort of rainy-esque, but still nice.
Okay.
Very briefly, the elementary school building committee is actively engaged and are currently interviewing architectural firms. And the academy community center building committee, Bruce and I are starting interviews, we believe, this week to populate that committee and get them started.
Okay, great. All right, let's move on to citizens' comments. Any citizens' comments?
There are none.
Great. So let's move on to item number 6, discuss regulatory options relating to short-term rentals. I think this is a follow-up to our previous meeting. Erin, she could join the meeting. She had a few takeaways and things to look into and was going to report back on her findings. So I'll turn it over to Erin.
Good
Good morning. Welcome.
How are you? Okay, so to pick up where we left off, we were going to kind of go through a few options and get a flavor for which direction the board would like to go, and then staff can draft some language if necessary. So I think at this point, the need for stronger short-term rental restrictions or ban is based mostly on anecdotal evidence from neighbors. I don't have a lot of concrete complaints in the zoning department or through the police department, except for the petition that the board has received. So if you get the sense that there is a need for restriction, we have a few options. I guess one of the very initial things that could be done is to explore just a general noise ordinance through the town, in which all residents would then have to abide by. And that would, I think, moving forward in that direction would involve some more discussions with the police department as far as staffing requirements, expenses for equipment, things like that, and what their general sense is on a noise ordinance. Other options that specifically relate to short-term rentals could be allowing by right in residential zones, basically by tracking business licenses. That could give, the process would be basically defining what a short-term rental is, establishing registration fees, and clarifying that registration process and any tax collection associated with that. So that's just basically identifying and taking advantage of some of the revenues of that as an accessory business. The second option would be to conditionally permit short-term rentals, and that's where we get into a more specific ordinance that would require a permit process, where a permit could be reviewed by administrative staff. It's a staff level approval process subject to applying certain criteria and operating requirements under, with a registration form. So that's where you would look at number of units allowed or distance between them, or whether they're owner occupied versus non-owner occupied. That's where we would get into the specifics of criteria for really regulating a short-term rental. A third option is, as what was suggested in the petition, prohibition of a short-term rental. So it could be either a prohibition of all residential and accessory units. It could be a prohibition of secondary units only, or prohibiting short-term rentals unless the owner is actively living on the property. So there's all sorts of flavors as far as the extent of how the board is looking to step into this and regulate. I don't know if anybody had a chance to kind of think about it a little bit since our last discussion to get a sense of how much regulation you're looking to have.
Have we gotten a sense, Aaron, of the surrounding towns and what other towns are doing related to this, if anything?
In our adjacent shoreline communities, no, we don't have regulations. I have some good examples. Some other communities, Basra, I just had an example. Hartford has a short-term rental policy. Some of the other ones, but nobody in our immediate vicinity. Greenwich has one. Let's see, who else did I know? And they vary. Some of them are through a zoning regulation versus an ordinance. I've looked also through some of our planning sites and guidance on what some other municipalities were doing. They're interesting. I think there are ways to create regulations that are ensuring some level of safety and noise and parking. Those are the biggest concerns are noise and parking, it seems. And so trying to prohibit nuisance complaints. So there are some municipalities. I found actually some good examples from California for some of their communities where they've created good neighbor brochures. They require identification, both inside the units or outside the units with a 24-hour contact person. Some of them have gone as far as having hotlines, and this regulating will require identifying a staff personnel. And then, if you have after-hour complaints, then that would also involve the police department for enforcement and contacting the operator. So whoever the local operator is, whether it's an owner on the property, or if it's not an owner occupied, but someone local who can respond to the renters and try to address whatever the concerns are. Some of these municipalities also require notification information to be given to abutting property owners within a certain radius, 200 feet or so. That also gives the contact name for the operator of the Airbnb, so that they can also respond directly to the operator, whether there's, they kind of, some municipalities broke them down to just nuisance complaints for, that are not an emergency versus emergency type complaints. But I thought the brochures, some of them were interesting how they had them out. They require documentation in the permit process of what they're providing to the renters, identifying safety exits. They require inspections by either the building official or the fire marshal to walk through and make sure smoke alarms and CO2 detectors are operational. So, I mean, we could get into a robust ordinance that goes through step by step, all of a process. It's just a matter of whether or not we feel it needs to be regulated to that extent. And I think
back to your point, though, Aaron, originally you had mentioned it was sort of anecdotal evidence. You know, have we talked to the police department to find out, you know, is it mostly noise? Is it mostly parking? Is it, you know, have we gotten 2 complaints? Have we gotten 50 complaints? You know, do we have a sense of what that looks like yet?
When I talked to Doug Harkins, he had indicated that their nuisance complaints, they're basically wellness checks. So whether it's noise, they don't distinguish between the specific types of complaints. So at this point, without going in and analyzing the data and sorting it of what each specific call is over the last couple of years, we don't have that actual number of what's a noise complaint. And if it's a noise complaint, is it a resident who, you know, owner occupied resident versus a rental? I'm not sure we would ever get that information. You know, I mean, we'd probably have to read through the reports individually to see.
Aaron, I just asked you a question, whether or not it's noise or parking, let's put them together. Do the police have a sense that they got a lot of calls last summer about this short-term rental issue in general?
No. Captain Harkins did not identify short terms at all in a complaint. Okay. So it was not specified. He did not have that breakout of just short-term rentals. We had talked even about noise, and he said he doesn't even have a full breakout of noise without having an officer go through and sort all of the complaints specifically. The way that they're called in, they're called in under a general wellness, I think was the word that he used for a check. So even if, you know, you wanted to check on your elderly neighbor or someone, that those are all kind of this under the same umbrella of calls out. So it would take a little bit more in-depth sorting of those calls. If that's something that the board is looking for, then I'm happy to go back to Doug and kind of get us a little more of a sense of, he did indicate that of 90% of the calls that they receive, they're resolved by just going out there and talking to whomever is on the property, rarely without an enforcement action needed to be taken.
So I for one, really am not interested in trying to describe this topic around the frequency of police complaints. I think we've heard a lot of public comment. We've received a petition. We've received an extraordinary number of letters from residents saying, hey, this is an issue. This is an issue we'd like you to take up and resolve in some way. And we get letters both ways, right? We get letters saying, please allow me to continue. And we've got letters and comments saying, please put some sort of structure around this. So deciding whether or not this is a topic worthy of our attention, I think it absolutely is. And our conversation really should be focused on next steps. How do we come up with a structure that everybody can live with. Because I don't think anybody is seriously considering just an outright ban, right? That wouldn't seem to work. And leaving it as the Wild West doesn't seem to be working either. So we need to be looking for some sort of compromise solution. And that's really the conversation I'm hoping we can have here is how do we move this to some sort of good compromise that everybody can live with.
To that end, Bruce,
Couch
Erin has identified at least 4 approaches for us this morning. Erin, when you read those off, were those in order of intrusiveness, with the least intrusive first and the most intrusive last? What I'm trying to get at, in line with what Bruce is suggesting, is what would be the minimal first step if we chose to get involved?
I think that the business license or registration process is probably the least restrictive as far as conditionally approving these locations and getting involved in the specifics of the actual rental, parking, inspections, and occupancy, things like that. If it were just a matter of registering, so you had a list of where these were so that they could be taxed or contacted, I guess that's probably.
Well, obviously this isn't about taxes, but as I understand your comment, you just quickly moved from license or registration into what you call conditional permitting.
Right.
And licensure and registration by itself doesn't speak to the complaints we've gotten so far. Is that correct?
No, it would identify. That's basically it, have a contact person to identify, but it wouldn't get into actually regulating specifics or enforcing. So if you're looking to have that level of oversight from the town, then I think that second option of a conditional permit for short-term rentals would be the most appropriate approach.
I think
Go ahead.
I think that it would be probably productive for us to start segmenting the different types of rentals out, because I don't think we're going to come up with a universal policy that fits everything. And just to give you examples of the extremes, that owner occupied house, maybe they live in the house, they rent their carriage house, or they live in the carriage house, they rent their house, or they live in the house, but they're going to be away for a month and they want to rent it out, right? So that's one end of the spectrum. And then there is the absentee LLC investment company that owns 6 houses in a strip, and they're never there, and they own the houses for the sole purpose of renting them out. I think that represents sort of the other end of the extreme, and I don't think the solution for one works for the other. So I think that's the most productive place for us to start, is to start segmenting out these different types of rentals, and then coming up with
knowing
solutions.
how many of each, Bruce. And I don't know if that comes back to your point, Aaron, about the registration, but do we even have a sense of how many there are in each one of those categories? We may not.
Not broken out, no. I mean, you can look at, these short-term rentals sites to get a rough idea of how many are listed. However, I don't think that's really going to give us an accurate picture.
You probably have to cross that against the tax records.
Well, but I think that, the first step, maybe rather than jumping right into some sort of ordinance to fix a problem that we haven't necessarily have the data to know what the problem really is, maybe the first step is just creating, you listed these different action items. One, the second one is just creating a business licensing program. So at least now you know what property is being used, who owns it, how it's being rented out, so right. And so now you get, like, at least you have an experience trail now. And then you can tie that address to complaints and ordinances. And so you have at least a way that, okay, say we put this in place and we start step one is tracking these things. And then understanding, because I think a lot of this is anecdotal, right? So do we have LLCs buying up 6 properties in town? Until we put in this type of, licensing or registration process for them, we'll never know. Unless we have a staff member literally track down each address, and try to figure out who owns the property. So I'm just thinking in terms of, if there's a lot of hesitancy jumping right to regulation right now, let's maybe the first step is set up some sort of registration process so we have the information and then we can monitor it. And then if there's continues to be recurring problems, now you've got the data trail to support that. And then the board can consider other regulatory measures.
Like a noise ordinance, but possibly. But again, some of that's dependent on the number of complaints received.
Well,
I would hate to go put it in an ordinance or a regulation if we don't have data to back up the problem. So I kind of like this approach of moving down a registration path because at least it gives us better data that we don't have right now.
There may
So
be
then
consultants also that we can, who can help track these things. I did read about that in some other municipalities where they had hired somebody to who can kind of determine the overall number in the community.
Aaron, I just asked you during conversations with affordable housing, one of their proposals is we have some sort of a housing committee or housing, this is something that could have fallen when we decide what we want to have, that this could really be overseen by this committee or this person that we hire? Because housing is housing as far as I'm concerned. I don't think their recommendation was only affordable.
Well, my understanding of that committee was that it was an affordable housing committee who would just handle affordable housing as a point person.
Issues, okay.
And likely that staff person is me. So.
Well, you can't. This seems like a growing problem, or potentially it could be. It's surprising to me, and I don't want it all falling on you. None of us do. But what surprises me is obviously the beach is driving this. We have a summer town, beach town. Well, we have beach towns all throughout Connecticut. Maybe the other towns don't have regulations, but they've got to be being hit with the same problem. I mean, I can't imagine Fairfield County and the beach, they don't rent some of those houses out. We just got to find out how they handle it. Because obviously it's a quality of life for certain residents, this issue for sure. If you have a house next door,
it may just be, Noreen, though, that they choose not to regulate it, though.
Oh, right. I agree. But how did what do they do about it? What's short of regulation? And I don't know. But anyway,
I think that's the trick right now, or that's sort of our conundrum is to regulate or not to regulate. I mean, I just don't think we know enough yet to make a decision on whether or not we need to jump in and actually, put something in place to regulate.
Well, is there
we don't know if there's an official problem because we've heard from both sides.
Is there something short of regulation that we could be doing just to potentially try to ease this problem, to address the problem without a regulation? I don't have the answer, but I mean, I don't think
I like Peggy's recommendation, though. I think at least a starting point maybe to register so that we at least have a sense of, who's out there first. Is it a predominance of LLCs, or is it a predominance of, a person with a carriage house, as Bruce mentioned? I don't know.
And where that would kick in at what level versus you renting it to a family member or something.
Right.
Where does that kick in? It just seems this has got to be a problem beyond Madison. But I just feel, even though the police don't have the calls, I think we've gotten enough letters and all that we need to at least to pursue something to see if there's some way we can make it better this coming summer. And we might find out, as said, Scott, we might find out that this is just, 5 or 6 people.
Yeah, exactly.
This could be a small number of people that are really not overseeing their property the way they should.
But until we have the data, we can't factually have that conversation. Same with the police, right? We can't factually say right now that short-term rentals are an enforcement issue. We just don't know.
Well, but we
can quantify the letters that we've received. We can quantify the petition. And we have heard from residents that they're reluctant to call the police because they want to be good neighbors. They don't want to be the people. So if we're saying we're not in a position to take any action until we quantify this with complaints, then we need to say to people, look, if you have an Airbnb next to you and they're noisy, call the police and tell them this is an Airbnb. And and I'm not sure that that's a solution. I'm also, I'm distressed that we would say, okay, let's put aside all the letters, the petition. What are other towns doing? We have residents saying, this is an issue for us. Please pay attention to it.
Bruce,
Framing
just
it
to that point though. So what would you propose that we do?
So I think that the registration thing, I would like to see a proposal to do that is fine, but I think we have to start from the position that there are different classes of rentals. There are the true absentee, don't live in the town kind of owners. And there are the residents that are doing some sort of short-term subletting. Let's come up with those buckets and start to think about how we might fairly and not burdensomely, put some structure around that type of rental in consultation with residents, both the people that are renting and the people that are neighbors.
But I think that I could see is, step two. Step one is,
Figure out who's who.
documenting who's who owns the property. And, I also think that once you have people having to declare themselves through a regular, a registration process, I think, that's when you can educate them about, we could have policies around good neighbor policies and an education process, and that we need a phone number for a contact. And, now you've created I'm on the radar now, right? As a property owner, as renting out this property. And then step two could be what you're talking about, is then if we see an overwhelming number of LLC groups owning properties, we're realizing, wow, this really is a problem. Now we need to figure out, is that what we want? From short-term rentals, and then how do we regulate that? I think right now we don't know what the town has. And I think registration at least gives us the facts to work with, as well as a chance to actually have that outreach to people who do rent these properties, so they understand, so we can educate them.
Here's another little conundrum that we would need to think about, Bruce, to your point. Like, let's just say we get, a whole host of people to register, and then we find out that somebody is renting that is unregistered. To me, that's a policy that we should be looking at, probably, right?
Well, okay, so and that's what I was thinking of. What are the consequences for not registering? So we create this voluntary registering.
No, I think we create a fine. I mean, you're required to do it. I don't think it would be a
that's
voluntary
an ordinance,
registration.
right?
That's what I'm saying. That's step one. Whether
Yes,
it's
part of an ordinance.
yeah.
You're right. And Bruce, to speak to there are examples where municipalities have distinguished between a hosted unit versus a non-hosted unit. And that's where the owner remains on site or resides on site or on a property immediately adjacent to the rental property. And some of the ordinances have distinguished between the two. Where there may not be limitations on the number of days per year that a hosted unit could be rented. However, they could distinguish for a non-hosted unit where the property owner has to remain on the property for 9 months out of the year, and the units can be rented for 90 days out of a calendar year. Some of them have gotten into detail to that level. Now, I think you may find that there will still be people who are unhappy with that type of a setup because they may not be living on the property that long. So that type of regulation could effectively be a prohibition of an off-site owner renting the property for a short term for a certain number of days.
But Aaron, doing that, you would also rule out any owner who moves out of their house, goes away for a month or whatever, because they're not going to be there. And it would help people that are using their accessory building for this rental. But people that are actually renting a house house they own, I think it'd be problematic to expect them to be on the property unless there's a secondary building.
Right. Well, yes. So if somebody were leaving for 3 months or, you could have short-term, you could have up to 3 monthly short-term rentals, essentially. So that does give a property owner flexibility to rent. And if it were a 6 month, rentals beyond 30 days would not fall under a short-term rental regulation. You would specifically define what a short-term rental is.
The state actually defines what a short-term rental is, doesn't it?
I believe it's less than 30 days. I think 30 days is where some have gotten into rent control, things like that, other regulations.
I think it's 90 days if you look at it from a tax standpoint.
I think you're right. I think I've heard 90 days.
Yeah, it's 90 days. So you have to pay, you have to charge occupancy tax if you were, well, no.
Less than?
It's 30 days and 90 days. There's a weird definition. If it's less than 30 days, there's some weird definition around this. I'm trying to remember now, 90 versus 30, but we'd have to double check that.
I have the tax information.
And then not to complicate the conversation, Al, you mentioned the taxes and where taxes aren't a focus. But in learning more about this, the owners that are renting this out are charged by the state of Connecticut a hotel tax.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's 30 days. It's less than up to 30 days.
The state recognizes this type of rental as a hotel. And so there's a commercial aspect to it. And at some point where, if we can identify that line from that owner occupied casual type of rental to this is really a business and the owners are engaging in this purely for profit. Well, if you open up a business in Madison, you have to pay property tax on the contents of that building. And if you're a business, you're a business.
But would they typically pay both? Does a business pay property tax and business tax back to, just a general business?
Oh, yeah.
So is it both? Because I would assume they're already paying like to Airbnb as an example as well, or whatever
Well, Airbnb collects the fees that the taxes and stuff that the state imposes, right? So they skim that off the top and send it off to the state, is my understanding. But if you were to open a business in Madison, you would have to provide the town with an inventory of all of the everything you have in the building, and you would down to desks and chairs, and you would pay taxes, property taxes on the value of it. So if you are operating a business in every measurable sense, why wouldn't the town seek to collect property taxes on that business the way it does every other business?
Well, especially if you're going to get into requiring staff to regulate these or have some level of, that helps provide some revenue to the town to be able to handle staffing concerns.
I think also it does get into the issue of also the term, you have somebody who rents out their house for a month. So you're going to do property tax. They have 1 month that they're renting the house out and they live in it 11 months. And you're going to tax their personal contents and their property. So that's where it gets into how do we define this? It's complicated.
Well, each case is different,
Yeah.
Beyond the intrusion and all. And I think we do have to, I think you're right, Peggy. We have to identify really what the problem is. We've gotten not enough information right now, but I'm concerned, I think you all are, about a safety issue here. We talk about, the number of cars and pulling them up on lawns and stuff. The amount of it, usually there's a party situation. And I'm talking about the extreme cases where, they said there could be 20 people in the house for a wedding weekend. And that could be every weekend that would happen. And also, I don't know if there's any capacity. This was a building, you'd have a limit on how many people could be there. I don't know if that's an issue, but there does seem to be potential safety implications with what's here, what's happening in town right now.
But even I agree with you, but even if it is a safety issue or a potential safety issue, residents need to feel comfortable in picking up the phone and calling 911, calling the police. And I think, there is, unfortunately, I think, don't tell on your neighbor conversation here. They don't want to do that consistently because of, neighborly, they want to keep neighborhood peace. So I get it. It's tough. It's not an easy one.
No, a lot of these homes in the beach area are also part of private beach associations too, where these homeowner associations, beach associations can establish their own bylaws for the properties within their jurisdiction. So that's a conversation that can be had on the private end as well to help towards regulation.
That's really a good idea, because these they do have their own rules and regulations for each one of these beach groups. They could be protecting the residents too. Of course, they don't want to tell someone they can't rent it, but there's something in the middle that could happen. Peggy, is there anything?
It might be interesting to get some of their feedback from the various beach associations to see if they've entertained this at all.
So I'm just trying to think, because obviously there's a lot in terms of, it sounds, so is the board interested in at least in looking at this kind of registration process right now as a first step? Obviously there might be more to it. It might be include regulation, but at least coming back with what would that look like? Other towns do have this, and just focusing on that as step one. And then, if we want to expand it in terms of discussion about regulation, we can certainly do that. I think Erin needs some marching orders, so to speak, that are specific enough that she can kind of go down a certain path.
I like that. An ordinance.
It's a great first step.
Yeah.
If other towns
or nothing, right, Erin?
Well, and I'm curious. I may reach out to some of these communities on how they tracked, and got more in-depth data on what is actually happening in our community. How did they go about and create that? So we have a picture of what we have. So I'm going to look into that further. I'm happy to provide you with some examples of some of these registration process, some tax examples, and see where others have gone from that point forward.
Erin, I would also be interested in knowing what it's going to cost in terms of time, energy, and money for the town of Madison to set up a registration system. Because I without getting too far ahead of ourselves, I think we need to cover the cost of that, perhaps through a registration fee.
Right. I think most communities did have some type of registration fee.
And when we talk registration fee, Peggy mentioned other towns have registrations. Who has to register? Would we put something together that, obviously someone who owns 6 houses, you'd expect it, but is there a limit to who would have to register? You have to rent your house out X amount of days, or does anybody?
I think that's what we would talk about, right? You come back with some suggestions.
Okay.
Ultimately, it would be defining what a short-term rental is, and then providing that information to the property owners in town. And I think it would be more through the tax department, basically, as this tracking type method of a registration. Clearly, we'd have to go through the specifics, but I think it would be based on our tax records of.
And one more thing with the person who buys 6 houses and rents them out every week, whatever, and this is it's their whole production. Could we take a look at if they're paying the right property tax on that property? Because if it's a business, I think Bruce brought this up. If it's a business, would they be paying not an additional tax, but a different one, a commercial tax? You might discourage somebody from buying 6 houses, and I don't know. It's just, I think we do have to take this a step further. Peggy, could you get any help from CCM?
I mean, we could do a call out to CCM, Aaron, right? Just to see if other towns are.
Yeah, what they're looking at. I had some information from the planners listserv through UConn, and then also through the Connecticut chapter of our planning association as well. But there, I mean, there's not a lack of options out here. I mean, we just have to kind of, finesse what exactly would fit Madison, and pick pieces from other municipalities. It's not, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we have to really kind of focus on what's most appropriate for our community. And if we, based on the number of units that we have, I don't know that we have 6 or 7, LLCs owning property, renting them out at this point. That's not specifically any complaints that we've received. I have a feeling we have a handful of probably troublesome properties that are not, well supervised. But I think there's a way to get a better picture of that. And then also to once we have that information, decide how we want to distinguish between, hosted units, because likely the complaints are not coming from hosted units. They're probably coming from properties that don't have an operator in the vicinity to oversee them. So, okay.
So that brings me back to the notion of bucketing these different types of properties. And I would like that to be an action item as well, that we, in the hypothetical, I think we can agree we've got at least one home where we've got an owner who lives there, who occasionally rents out their home, right? Or has an accessory dwelling unit that they rent out. I don't care how many there are, there's at least one, right? In the hypothetical, maybe there aren't any LLCs that own lots of property in Madison, but that day is coming because those groups are out there. They're actively doing this as a business model. And if they're not here today, they will be here. So let's come up with these different buckets for these different types of properties. And then we can start to imagine how much massaging to existing rules and regulations that other towns have that to fit into those, right? So again, I have no interest in an outright prohibition, and I have no interest in not doing anything. I think we need to do something, and we need to move the ball forward here somehow. I'm worried that just studying this is it's not going to be very satisfying to residents.
I don't think studying that.
I don't think studying is. I think registration is actually a big step forward.
Yeah.
Again, you're dealing with registration fees. You're potentially putting people into these categories. So we'll have knowledge then of which are the short-term rentals and which maybe are the problem childs. As a result of this, I think non-registration will become an issue. I think it's absolutely moving the ball forward, Bruce.
It's
So
also
how
going to
long-
identify who's responsible for the property. So if you have an issue with the property, they have to register a point of contact for complaints, and it identifies the owner of the property. So it helps with that. Is that an Airbnb or is it not? You don't know unless you go on Airbnb and look it up, right? So we're pursuing both. So
What's a reasonable runway to have a draft of an ordinance to that effect back in front of us? What's a reasonable timeline for that type of registration ordinance to come back in front of us?
Well, how about I get some examples of some things, see if I can get a little more information on if there are companies that can actually help identify these properties. I'll give you some examples of registration forms and process from other towns for your next meeting. And then we can at least look at this and decide what pieces you like to, I can look at the examples and draft something for you. I may have to coordinate a little bit with Orietta as far as taxing and for tax collector, because that's not necessarily my forte, but I'll see what I can get you so that at least we can keep moving in the right direction. I'm happy to also just provide you some examples of some fairly reasonable regulations that I came across that really were just trying to prevent nuisance complaints in communities. So you could read through them, and I'll just email you out a packet so you can kind of see what these flavors are and what other municipalities are doing. And maybe in reading them, you might just want to say, hey, this ordinance isn't really unreasonable, so maybe we'll just go in this direction. Some of them I did kind of get that sense that they weren't all that restrictive, but they did give some accountability to the property owners. And I think at that point, it would be more that that we would have to identify who's the point person for these complaints. You know, does this during business hours go to one individual versus after hours to the police department? Because we do have to have coordination, I think, with police for after hour complaints. And maybe neighbors would like that, knowing that, you know, we have good neighbor type guidelines for the property owners. We require them to be as part of the rentals, and now they have contact names of who they should call to manage them, and we move forward for a season to try. You know, you can always tweak this as you go, I think, and I've seen communities do that where they've tried something and realized, oh, we had a whole bunch of property owners who have circumvented this regulation. They've learned not to advertise here, so it doesn't get tracked, and they've found ways around it. And then some of the communities just created a very basic login and a permit process, and it's been fairly successful. So
I think that's great. I think send around some of those examples, and we'll just have this as a rolling discussion item, you know. I think but we have to be honest with the public and ourselves that this is not going to impact this summer. I mean, there's no way you can somehow create a, you know, first of all, most properties this summer have been rented out already, right? They've rented under whatever, no regulation, but but we want to try to at least know that by the end of the summer, we will have a solution for the next year. So when people are starting to rent out their properties for the year after that, they understand what the rules might be that the town would be implementing.
So Peggy, you're absolutely right. We're not having this discussion with under the premise that we can do something for this summer. That's clearly not on the table. Yeah. However, it is front and center on everybody's minds because it's beach season. Yeah. And so this having our full attention, I think is timely.
Yeah.
But I think even to that point, having this conversation, and we've had several already, we've had people come in and share their thoughts. We've received letters and input from the public. So I think we are giving it a lot of attention here. And I think, you know, these next steps seem very reasonable to me.
Okay, well, then with that, let's just move on. So before we go into, we have quite a lot to talk about this, item number 7, I actually had a request from Sam DeBura to open up the agenda to add a special appropriation request regarding some specialty emergency equipment for the fire department. So I'd like to make a motion to open up the agenda for item 6A. And I guess, do I read the motion even though we're just opening it? I'm just opening up the agenda, right? So, okay, can I get a second for that?
Second.
Okay, great. Okay, and then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I'd like to then make a motion based on item 6A is discuss and take action to approve a special appropriation to Madison Hose Company #1 in the amount of $49,500 to purchase I don't know what you call this, but it's a specialty emergency equipment for emergency services. And there's a list that Lauren can put up on the screen that was also sent around by email. I know this is kind of last minute, but they're a little bit kind of in, I don't want to say crisis mode because that's not a good thing to say in public safety, but I'll let Sam talk to the issue that we're dealing with.
I'll
Oh, we
second.
got to vote. Sorry. Can I get a second for that?
Now-
yeah.
Now we're in discussion, so we're good.
Okay. Oh, well, okay. Okay. We're in discussion. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So Sam, go ahead and explain the problems we've had the last couple of weeks.
Hey, Lauren, is Mike Beast, your Captain Carol on at all?
I just moved Mike over. I
Uh,
don't see Greg.
All right, so basically what's going on is these are our rescue hydraulic tools that we use to get people out of situations such as crashed vehicles and other areas. So there's been an ongoing problem with our current system. It seems to work fine during training, and sometimes when we get to an accident, it doesn't come on. Sometimes it dies in the middle of the extrication. We've had the companies look at it several times, and right now everybody just feels it's an unreliable system. So they wanted to switch over to a completely battery operated system. Right now there's a hydraulic pump on the truck, and the tools work off hydraulic lines that are on wheels. So this is just the pricing for the different types of tools that we could get, and they're gonna pick out and get the most equipment we can for the $49,500. So right now we do have some loaner equipment that we're using to fill the gap.
Sam, may
So
I ask you
the
a
special
question?
request isn't for this entire list, it's for some version of this list?
Correct.
Sam, was this something that came up during the budget time at all? Were you considering replacing?
No, it's just, it came to light after we've had a couple extrications and the tools haven't worked properly. So, after this they just got it fixed. We just put the truck in service 5 days ago, and 2 days later we had an extrication, and it failed again during the extrication. So basically they're kind of throwing their hands up and saying, let's move on to something else. And that's really what the urgency is right now.
Unfortunately, this is the time of year that they get called a lot to 95 for car accidents. And is there going to be any kind of, trade-in or, based on the equipment we currently have? Will you be able to at least maybe
So they're
offset some of
working-
this?
Yeah, they're working with the vendors now to try to figure out what we can get back for the system and that we currently have.
How new, Sam, is the system we currently have?
It came with the truck, so the truck is 6 years old. It should last a lot longer, but for whatever reason, they can't figure out what the issue is, and everybody's kind of lost confidence in the system. It's not going to work when we need it.
Right, so again, what is the dollar amount of the special appropriation?
Well, 49,000. Sorry.
Is that simply to stay under the town meeting threshold, or is that really the number you need?
I think it's the standard of town meeting so that we could get this equipment purchased in a timely fashion.
If anything, it's up to 49,500, right? It's not a firm number. So they're going to go out, and they've been trying to get pricing. Obviously, this is one quote that they received. They're trying to get the best package. And Board of Finance meets Wednesday. So this would allow them to go out, and actually, do a full process and get, but they don't think it would go over 49,500. They just want to have that flexibility.
And North
Okay.
Madison doesn't have any of these capabilities, Sam?
They do. They have similar equipment.
So would theirs be failing also?
They don't have the same system as the power plant. If you understand. So the issue is with the the pump that's on the truck, it's kind of in a combination with the generator, just to save space. And for whatever reason, it's just the pump is getting kicked off. And we can't figure it out.
Get a bigger hammer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this is not a case of what you really need total 60, but you're trying to stay under the threshold. You think that you're safely get what you need for less than 50,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion from the board? No?
Mike, is that? You got anything
So-
to add?
Yeah, that's it. We met last night as the officers, and the quote in front for the Hearst tools battery powered ones are the ones that we are comfortable with. We currently have one spreader and one cutter that is Hearst, and the great thing is it hasn't failed us when the truck tools didn't work. So we're confident with those ones, and then it's just narrowing down price wise what we want within that 49.5.
Okay.
Are we at all concerned that we're then going to see a similar request from North Madison as well? I mean, has there been conversations with them, or they're
No,
fine?
to my knowledge, they haven't been having any issues with their stuff.
So it's kind of like we got a lemon or something here with they kept
I
trying to repair it.
don't know if we can put the lemon law to it, but
Yeah.
we're pursuing
Yeah.
avenues.
All right, well, with that then, all in favor of approving the special appropriation request from Madison Hose Company for up to $49,500, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, okay, great. All right, guys. Take care, thank you for all the work you guys do.
Do we get the next item?
Yep, so now we have the next item, so. Item number 7 is a presentation from Madison Hose Company and the Emergency Management Department on proposed Firehouse EOC expansion plan. I will turn it over to Sam to talk about this. Basically, the Firehouse project has kind of been sitting in CIP for a while now. It's been this need to do an expansion. And one of the things that had been identified in our facility study was the need for a permanent emergency operations center, which we currently don't have. We have a closet that we have to bring out, and we borrow a boardroom from our conference room from the Board of Education. And so there was some thinking in, collaboration between emergency management and Madison Hose about putting together the expansion plan and creating an EOC for the town, which a lot of towns actually have their EOCs at a firehouse. And the nice thing is also this project enabled us to apply for a grant with federal money for Homeland Security. And so this kind of came up quickly earlier this year because Congress is continuing with their congressional directed spending program. And so we took an initiative of applying for that with this plan. We haven't accepted it. So obviously the board needs to get their arms a little bit more around just the addition of the EOC to this project that had the expansion project. And we were informed that we are on the list now. So if the budget moves forward as with the funding for these special congressional directed spending projects, that means that we would get a $2.5 million grant to fund the Firehouse expansion project, which is phenomenal. So this was kind of, we had to act quickly in terms of getting the grant in because the applications were due in March. But I wanted to give Sam the opportunity just to walk through the project with the board, because you probably saw an earlier version of this that was just focused on the Firehouse expansion. And this is adding another element that we think is a critical infrastructure need for the town. And that was identified, through the facility study. So I will let Sam, are you going to do it?
Yeah, I could share it.
Okay.
think I picked the wrong screen. All right, so real quick, so the host company is run by a board of directors and officers, chief captain, first lieutenant, second lieutenant. We currently have 35, cap of 35 active members, and right now we're at 33, so we have a couple openings if anybody wants to volunteer. We have 10 exempt members, and that's basically, once you get into, in 12 years, you can apply to be exempt status and you become a life member, and you can still participate if you wish. The building we've been in since 1955. It's currently 13,000 square feet. It's owned by the host company. And we purchased the property next door to the east in 1980s, in the 80s, to hopes of future expansion. So as you'll see in a future slide, there's currently 3 lots that we'd have to merge together. So a little bit of history. So in 1907, the host company was formed and they rented a garage somewhere around where RJ Julia's is now. And then it moved down to a few years later when the rent went up, they moved out and they moved down to where Creations just, the Vista Creations just moved out of. And then they moved into 679 Boston Post Road where Head Start is and Susan Powell gallery there. So they were there until 1955 when they bought the Molnar garage from the Gulf Oil Company. And we've been in that current location ever since. So we've upgraded the floors, redone the whole second floor, roof, changed all the apparatus doors. We put new HVAC system in, 4 drains, LED lighting and paneling, and we're actually in the process of doing some upgrades to the exterior of the west side of the building. So we need more apparatus space. We just had to modify the building a little bit to get our new ladder truck in. We need male, female bathrooms, offices. There's currently no offices for the officers or secretary treasurer doing any of their work. Kitchen needs upgrading, training room, boat storage, maintenance area, gear storage, medical, and room for the future. So this is our current conceptual plan that we have in place. So the top rendition is we'd add 2 bays onto the east side of the building. And then down below is this is your east side elevation, and then your west side elevation, which is right now towards Cumberland Farms. And we're actually, that shiplap, it's up there now. We're starting to put brick on it. It's going to be brick this summer to make it look better. Then the lower one is what it would look like if you're standing by the pond. This is interior space that we would gain. The second floor up in the back here, this would become the training / EOC room. The building would have an elevator, access for disabled people. And right now, this is the site plan. So parcel A is where the main building is. C is where our addition is, and then parcel B is a little piece that somehow got, cut off, but down by the pond. So we'd have to do join all those parcels together to make the one parcel for coverage and stuff like that for zoning. So how this would meet our needs is there's 1,800 square feet of apparatus floor space that would significantly let us spread out our apparatus. If you've been in the firehouse lately, it's pretty cramped. There's a large multi-purpose training room you'll see up on the second floor. There would be offices, there would be storage, there would be male and female bathrooms and showers. A lot of this stuff was identified in the DRA study. We would be able to host classes and probably bring in revenue, workstations, and then keep the needs for the future in mind. The estimated cost of the project is roughly just a little less than $3.5 million. It could be done in phases. If we get this grant, we could do the whole thing probably. So these are some of the avenues that we looked into for we're raising money for it. And then right now, the current operating budget of the host company is $165,000. And that's just, to do utilities. We could add solar to offset, some of the utilities. And then, the good thing about this is the addition is not going to put a big demand on the septic system. We would have to upgrade it, but it wouldn't have to make it much bigger than what it is now. The septic's been there, I think, since the 50s. So the other options are if we move the fire station, one thing is where we put it. The current location is very good. We have access to, east and west of Route 1, northbound on 79. And it's easy for our members to get there to get the trucks. If you're gonna look before you bought property, to build a brand new building, you're probably looking at 15 million or plus. Could be anywhere between 15 and 20 million. Branford's did their firehouse 10 years ago, and that was $14 million. So we could completely renovate the current building, or we could add a second fire station someplace. But again, it has to be, property has to be identified and secured. So that was a quick overview. Do you have any questions?
Sam, thanks for that. Thinking about sea level rise, how is that property situated from an elevation perspective? Is it at risk?
So it could be a risk in the future from sea level rise, but right now it's out of the category 1, 2 evacuation area. We did have, you remember in 1982, we had like about a week of rain, and we did get some flooding through there. The Tuxas Pond rose up and kind of came in the back door and out the front. That's the only time that I ever remember any issues about it being flooded.
It's hard to see from the plan, the front elevation with the doors, the new doors, the two new doors that would be added. Would those be at a more standard height that would accommodate future equipment?
Yeah, so they would be probably at least a 12 or 14 foot door, probably 14.
Would you move the ladder truck over there?
Yes.
And then, Peggy, to your comments about an EOC, does this plan accommodate that, or does the plan need to be modified more?
So
Go ahead, Sam.
So there would be room to have a position for all the emergency support functions that are outlined in what you should have in the EOC. So I think it's going to be a lot more adequate than what we have now. And the thing is, everything will be set up and permanent. So you have to really do is come and turn the lights on. All the radio equipment that's up here now, we could move, and we could probably move the satellite as well, or satellite internet. So all the existing equipment that we have for the EOC could be moved down there. We wouldn't have to purchase any new radio equipment or anything else like that.
It basically the training room, right? And
yeah, it'd be,
yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, so as you know, we don't use the EOC all the time. So this benefits of having the training room. So it's a multi-purpose room. So it's going to be getting some use for other things besides just being EOC, and it's available when we need it.
I know that was it Cheshire is set up like that, and so is Branford, right? Where they have big training conference room, and that also serves as their EOC during emergency operations.
Right. Yep, it's a similar model of what's around the other departments around the state.
Sam, may I just ask you, and you might have said this, for your planning, the sketch you've shown us, you have enough, they have enough land there now to do that? They don't have to purchase the
correct
property? They have enough. A few years ago, I was given a tour, and I mean, I'm sure you all had a chance to do this, but I remember him showing me inches where these, as Bruce was talking about, the new equipment, as it seems to get bigger and bigger, especially when you start building bigger buildings like our high school or higher buildings. But boy, I was amazed at how tight it was over there.
Yeah, and then going into the future with this electric fire apparatus coming, they're developing it now. It's longer. There's basically a 16-inch battery behind the cab of the truck that makes the truck 16 inches longer. And then you'd have to upgrade, for the charging station for the firehouse is a couple $100,000. So that's, something we'll have to plan for as well, but it would actually give us the benefit of having the more room to spread out.
Well, if we could get this grant, it would really answer a lot of problems, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Sam, one of the reasons I admire you is your presentations are so crisp and short and direct. We appreciate that. I'd like to follow up on Bruce's question, since I've been sitting on the Coastal Resiliency Commission as a liaison. There is going to be, at some point in the future, increasing frequency of water in the downtown. I have no idea how many decades off that is, but every piece of science indicates that it is coming. This has huge implications for our entire downtown, but this morning we're just talking about the Firehouse. And so I think we just need to be cognizant, as Bruce has suggested, that there's going to be increasing frequency of water downtown on the street.
No, there is, but I don't think you and I are going to have to worry about it. When that day comes, I think we'll be gone.
I will point out that technically our EOC right now is in a flood zone. Town hall is in a flood.
Yeah,
Town campus is in a flood zone. So
we're in that one evacuation area.
yeah, we're in an evacuation area. So I think it's an important point. The question is, short-term versus long-term, I guess. This could be a good 20-year solution for a reasonable amount of money that would be mostly funded by the federal government versus a $20 million project, that might set us up for 50 years, right? But it's all important things that we have to think about. The good thing is we have two services. So in an emergency, we can, no matter where we put it downtown, we're probably going to have a problem anywhere south of Route 1, right? But we do have North Madison as well. So we have at least a alternate, location. And sometimes you guys stage equipment when you think there is going to be a concern, right? In terms of around town, to make sure that there's accessibility always.
Yeah, we do that, during the heavy traffic events. We take the apparatus out of the station and move it around town so it's accessible to other areas.
Sam, is there an emergency generator as part of the future of this firehouse?
So we have one. We have one now, and what's there should be adequate to run, the EOC.
Thank you.
And this you'll have an opportunity, to, if this, as it works its way through this year in the process, I think we'll probably want to come back with a more refined proposal. This has to go through planning and zoning. I mean, if we were to get the grant, we still would have to go through all the normal regulatory things. So there'll be modifications to this. And then obviously the board would be voting on accepting that grant. And so we would give more details about what that would mean. I'm optimistic because it made the list, but the federal appropriation process, I'm learning, is very convoluted and can be a little unpredictable at times. And so I'm grateful for Congressman Courtney's strong support for this project, though, I will say that, and we're excited that he because he got a number of things done throughout the district this past budget cycle, and all his projects got approved. So I'm hopeful that we'll have the same luck this year.
Yeah, and just a point of reference. So Collier, we got our estimates from Collier, since the town's been using Colliers for a lot of their other projects. They put their eyes on it and come up with our numbers.
Okay, so to be continued, but I wanted to keep you guys in the loop and update you on something I think is quite exciting too. So thank you, Sam. So we have another presentation. I think from Joe Comerford, who's the director of the Estuary Transit District. And I appreciate his patience. Hopefully he's still there. The reason I'm asking him to talk to us is the Estuary Transit District is actually merging with Middletown's transit district. So it's going to create a wider regional service. And in looking at that service, and then also looking at, our discussions about affordable housing, one of the criteria is often access to public transportation, and ours is quite limited. It's all focused on downtown along Route 1 between the train station and the service that we currently received from Ninetown Transit. So I've had some conversations with Joe about the opportunity to expand public transit in Madison to include other parts of town, which would maybe open the doors up for other types of development if we choose to go in that path, but also just create greater service to the community overall. And by the merger with Middletown, it just creates a lot of different opportunities. So a while back, the town chose not to join the transit district. This was back, I think, under Fillmore's when he was in service. And we've been kind of a non-voting member of the district and just kind of participate, and we get limited service. But if we were to become a full member, it opens us up to a lot of other opportunities, but there's a cost associated with that as well. So I wanted to invite Joe to maybe talk about that a little bit, what's going on with Ninetown, to update you and what some options might be for Madison going forward. And they're also running the Hammonasset shuttle the summer shuttle that the state has been funding between the different stops in Madison to encourage people to take the train to go to the beach. And that's been run by Ninetown Transit as well. So Joe, I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me. I share my screen here. Share the right one. All right. So hopefully you're seeing it. So I'll give a very, very quick rundown of who we are. Hopefully you all know who we are. So we are the public transit agency for, well, I used to say Lower Connecticut River Valley, but now as of July 1st, pretty much all of Middlesex County, plus a few towns. We actually have now 12 member towns. And we, as just Ninetown, we did about 100,000 trips per year. Combined with Middletown now, it's closer to about 400 pre-COVID numbers. And we do that through fixed routes, which I know you know because we have some going through Madison. We have two actually in Madison. We have a paratransit service, kind of bolded some of the ones that serve Madison here. That runs within 3/4 of a mile of our fixed routes. And that's for people with disabilities who can't use a regular route. So we have ADA paratransit service that we provide in Madison from the Clinton Town line along Route 1, again within 3/4 of a mile in either direction of Route 1 to the center of town. So there is some service available there for people with disabilities that goes anywhere that the route goes. So it goes as far as Old Saybrook. They can even get as far as New Haven through various current connections and such. So there's a lot in that little corridor. There are some opportunities for people with disabilities. We also have our taxi voucher program that's available to residents of Madison. That's where we pay half the cost of a taxi trip for people with disabilities and for seniors. They could go anywhere, travel anywhere in the state of Connecticut. And we cover half the cost through our taxi provider, who, in addition to having sedans, also has accessible cabs. So it's available to people with disabilities as well. And then our Park Connect program is another service that serves Madison, as Peggy already mentioned. For Madison, it's our Madison shuttle. It goes from Madison to Hammonasset. Also part of that is extended service on our Madison to Middletown route, which runs on Saturdays under this during the summers under Park Connect, and the Clinton trolley. And then some services that we don't have in Madison, but we do have in other parts of the district. Our general public dollar ride, that serves our entire district. So including the towns that contract us for service. So our dollar ride now serves 16 towns. And so people could travel anywhere within those 16 towns. And in areas that are not along a fixed route, which again is most of Madison, that's not right on Route 1, it's general public dollar ride. So for instance, if somebody lives in Killingworth, you could be a senior, you could be disabled, or you can be just a 25-year-old perfect, non-disabled person who has to get to work or whatever, and you could use our dollar ride to travel anywhere within our 16 towns that we serve. And then in the old Saybrook and Westbrook area, we do an on-demand service that we call Extra Mile. People use an app or they can call us and the bus arrives on call. So on average, it's about a 12-minute wait for the bus to arrive, and it travels within a defined service area, again, mostly around Old Saybrook and a good portion of Westbrook. In August, we'll be expanding it to downtown Middletown and Wesleyan University. So that's a really rapidly growing service, extremely popular, and we've been. So this will be our first expansion of it. We've been running since 2019. We were one of the first in the state, one of the first in the country to run an on-demand service, and it's been incredibly popular. Our fares normally run from 85 cents to $3.50, depending on the service, and they're free through the end of November. Actually, under the recent part of the tax bill that was passed by the state that include the gas tax holiday, there also was a bus fare holiday through the end of November. And most of our operating costs are covered by the state and federal funds. Small portion is local match and fares. And that's my longest slides. I won't be so long on others. Here's a quick just to see. That's a 9-town service area. I don't have a map yet of the combined service area, but with Middletown, we now cover this whole area as well. Middlefield, Middletown, East Hampton, Portland. So just really quickly, our on-demand service, because I know something that we've talked about might be something to look at in Madison in the future, especially we've targeted around train stations. It's an old Saybrook, and all of Old Saybrook's covered, most of Westbrook, a little bit of Essex. And there's an app that they use. It looks like an Uber or a Lyft app. And again, it's just you book it when you're ready to go. And so some of the differences, of course, are that we use a wheelchair accessible vehicle, and that we have the call-in option. And about 45% of our trips are called in. And so, that's not a feature that's available on most other TNCs, is that, like Uber and Lyft. So it just makes it available to more people. Right now, that has been free since our pilot began in 2019. It's also free to at least the end of November. And so right now we're up to about 2,000 trips a month on that service alone. And so it just keeps growing and growing. It's been incredibly popular. We mentioned our Park Connect. You can see the little map there of the various Park Connect services. This is something that started back in last year. 2021 was our first season of it. I decided to continue it this year. It runs from Memorial Day to Labor Day. That program is always free. It was free last year as well. As it covers the Madison shuttle, which so far this year has already been doing better. We'll see if that holds up. But we did get the first weekend. We had a decent number of trips already. I think we've done a lot more marketing on it this year. So we've been the state has given us quite a bit of funding to promote it this year, mostly through digital marketing effort. So yeah, we're very hopeful that we're going to see even more of a usage than we did last year. And then we'll update on where we are in merging the two districts, Middletown and Estuary. The official merge date is July 1. However, the Middletown member towns already joined Estuary in February, which is all part of our transition process. We officially begin as July 1 as one agency. However, we'll continue to have two operating names for a little while. We are right now going through the process. We have a consultant, a marketing firm working on a new name, a new brand. They've been meeting with stakeholders. Both Peggy and Sherry participated in some of our stakeholder sessions to help us come up with what that name and brand should be. And we hope to roll that out later this year and start branding everything the same. Our administrative offices have already moved up to Middletown, but we are, part of the plan is a shoreline garage where the shoreline operations will be based out of. We have a location now, it's leased. The state is in active negotiations with a property owner to acquire property on the shoreline for that facility. So there will be both a Middletown garage and a shoreline garage that both are base of operations for the district. We did purchase new property already in Middletown. Middletown Transit District already had a garage. However, it's extremely undersized. So we've purchased property across the street to expand the maintenance operation and have adequate maintenance facilities for the combined district. And that hopefully will go into design within the next year. But it's a state project, so it's the acquisition was really quick, very quick for the state. But it's still a state project, so it'll move a little slower now that the property is acquired. We'll have the combined Dollaride, I said 13 towns here, but it's actually 16 towns, beginning July 1, 2022. And then expanding Extra Mile, as I said earlier, into Middletown in August. So really most of the merger behind the scenes is done, and now it's just trying to make the forward-facing part more operate as one with some of the same policies and procedures beginning July 1, and a little bit will push beyond that. As do some things like radios being very hard to get right now because of supply chain issues. We're up against things like that are slowing down some of those plans, unfortunately, but still moving along nonetheless. And so, as Peggy mentioned, Madison's long been kind of somewhere in between. We really have member towns. We have towns that contract us for full service that basically get the same service as our member towns, but don't get any say on the board. And Madison's kind of even different than that. You just, I think it's been about $4,500 a year for the ADA paratransit and fixed route service that you get. So you haven't been a full participant, but you have been, as Peggy said, attending our meetings lately, which is great. We're glad to have you. But some of the differences from that level of participation and being a member are, our members by our state statute, our state statute basically says that the towns that are members create us. So we are really a entity of the towns. And so our members own the district. They have seats on the board of directors, again, as prescribed by state statute, and are active participants in the administration setting the policies and direction of the district. The other thing that members of districts get is there's opportunities for capital and operating funding. As I said from the beginning, that most of our funds are state and federal that pay for our operating expenses. So it allows, even though many of those programs do have local match requirements, it does allow your local dollar to go a lot further. Because again, as I said earlier, about 10% of our total budget is local. So you can see how much that local dollar is stretched through our various funding opportunities. Another great thing that we have access to is capital funds. Our capital purchases are 80% federal funding and 20% state match. So there's no local match requirement for our capital. So all of our buses, all of our facilities, there's no local dollars in those at all. As you know, there's some grants like that for your senior buses that you're able to get for the 80%, but you still have to come up with a match. For us, there's no local match. And we have a dedicated source of capital. We are a direct recipient of federal funds. Capital is something we always have good access to. Sometimes operating can be tougher to compete for, but capital is something that we have really good access to. It's why we're able to have various software that allows us to run more efficiently. We have really advanced software for scheduling our paratransit, demand and dollar ride. The other thing that we do for our member towns is they're included all of our transit planning. We just did a $400,000 study that both recommended the combining the two districts, but also more than half of that was on a service improvement. And we looked at the entire service and did major data collection and analyzing it to determine how do we improve public transit going forward. And we have developed a plan for that. And that's something we do for our member districts. Unfortunately, Madison not being a member, there was some involvement. And we did look at some because we do go there, but not to the level we do for all of our member towns. And then we also have starting next month, we are sharing a dedicated transit planner with our Council of Governments. So we are going to have an ongoing planning process where we're constantly looking at improving public transit in for all of our member towns. Our members are able to join our dollar ride service area. So that, again, all gives you access to the entire service area and the ability to, if the town says, outside of our normal planning process, which usually we're identifying routes before towns, but sometimes it's not the case. As was the case in Clinton with the Clinton trolley, the Chamber of Commerce came to us and said, we really want to do a trolley in town. And so we were able to do that with them and started with the first year they came up with the operating funds. Again, because of some of our resources, we were able to do it more cost effectively than they were able to do otherwise, because we were able to provide the insurance on the vehicle and maintain the vehicle. But after I think in the second year, we were able to go to the state and get the state to expand that program to operate more days, more hours through the Park Connect program. So it started with a trolley that ran 18 hours a week, and now that trolley is running, I believe we're up to more than double that. It's about 35 or 36 hours a week. And the Chamber of Commerce is paying the same as they were before. And then, as I said earlier, we can expand other services like on demand because we already have access to software, vehicles. We could bring in all the capital resources, and we can often go after funds for operating. Again, maybe there's a local match requirement, maybe it's not, but that's something we could work on. In the state right now, also in this last legislative session, there was funding specifically allocated for more microtransit services throughout the state, and state DOT is working on coming up with a program for that. So there'll be availability of funds to expand on-demand services, on-demand service, microtransit, something kind of term we use back and forth. We use both terms, but it's a hot topic in public transit and in the state of Connecticut right now. So there'll be opportunities out there for that. And and all those obviously have different costs. As I said earlier, some things have local matches, some don't. But that's something we can go into more as we've learned what Madison's needs are and what level of involvement Madison wants to have with the district.
Is that your final
That's
slide?
it.
Okay, thank you. That was
But
very.
I also said,
Yeah, no,
I
that's a
also
great.
forwarded
Yeah.
all of our different brochures from our all of our different services. So hopefully you all got that as well.
No, I appreciate that. That was a great overview. There's going to be, I think the board is going to have a much more in-depth discussion of this at one point, but just for now, I thought this was a great introduction, at least to some of the things that are available to us. And so, if anybody has any questions for Joe.
Joe, thank you very much for this. You mentioned that the towns typically contribute 10% of the operating expense. Can you give us a sense of what that would represent for a town like Madison?
So, well, 10% is kind of what it works out to be for the total. That's not, there's no such thing as like a formula in the state. that would make too much sense. Every time we go after operating funds, there could be a different match requirement. We've never seen more than 17%, but sometimes there's zero, sometimes there's a match requirement. So it really will come down to what services Madison's looking at expanding a town. So if you said, look, right now, let's just keep what we have and let's just be a member. We've talked to the board. In that case, we're probably looking at an extra few thousand a year just because they want a little more buy-in from the town if you're going to be now an owner of the district, essentially. We do have especially now combined, we have a pretty significant fund balance. Our unrestricted net assets is what we call it, but equivalent of a fund balance for a town. It's about 1.3 million for a $6 million operation. So it's pretty significant fund balance. So that's kind of part of their thinking. But we have actually put in a request for expanding our dollar ride program to the state. So we'll see if the federal and state funding side get approved. But yeah, I mean, it's really going to be what does Madison want? If you say you want just dollar ride, it's probably puts you close to what Clinton, for example, pays about $39,000 a year. So just to give you an example of a town that's
just for dollar ride. It's just dollar ride.
That's total. What
Total.
they pay. That covers the routes they get, the dollar ride, ADA paratransit, everything. We typically have never assessed by service. We try to, in this case, it'd be a little different because we wouldn't want to just assess you when you're not getting, when you don't automatically get new service. So we got to come up with something that would be more fair. But as I said earlier, there's no formula. So we've also tried not to necessarily just make you pay for what you get, because it's not necessarily fair that one town got a 100% state funded service and this town has a local match on their program. And so our towns have always agreed, well, let's just combine the local match, whatever is required locally, and let's split them up amongst each other, because there is no rhyme or reason to why one service is free and another service has a local match. So I assume we would continue in that vein, but it's going to just depend on what services you want.
Yeah, and I think it might be helpful at another conversation is to at least show last year's budget and how it worked out with the different towns, what services they receive. And then also, because that translates into, voting on the board, and how that's structured. I mean, I think the one thing that Joe, you and I have talked about is getting a 79 service, a regular service, all the way up 79 up through Durham, because Durham has joined the district now, and that's fairly new. They just joined, right?
They did.
So that creates a huge connection to the network in Durham, and then going through Middletown. So that could just be a great, having that and dial-a-ride, I think covers a lot for us. But those are conversations we would have later, but maybe coming back at one point and really putting together more so we get a better idea of like the budget implications and what it would mean and what we would get for that.
Joe, could I ask you a couple questions? First of all, I've been an advocate of doing this for years. I'm glad Peggy's being proactive on it. It's, years ago we did a survey of seniors to show that we needed a senior center. That was our goal. In the end, the number one thing that seniors asked for was transportation. So a couple questions. Madison has a dial ride program. We do it separately through the federal government. We don't do it through you folks at all.
That's correct. Well, you guys do it on your own. So there's federal money in the buses themselves, but there's no federal money in your operations. There's state and local.
We cover all of that except for capital purchases. And even then we only have one bus, I think, that's funded capital, and then the town has actually purchased other buses.
Right. And that's with the senior program, the only availability really is buses through the federal program available for just senior mobility.
Could you explain to me the difference between dial-a-ride and this on-demand? The on-demand seems to address a lot of problems. What is the main difference?
Sure. So dial-a-ride is the traditional, you got to call in advance, at least a day in advance, typically. Some dial-a-rides have more, but at least a day in advance. There's usually, some pickup window. You say, okay, we'll be there between this time and this time. And that's really the big difference, is that day in advance type of pickup, whereas on demand is right now. You just decide, you know what, I want to go to the store, and you just can pull out your phone and either use the app or call us, and the bus comes. It's still that like curb to curb type pickup where it comes right to your house, goes right to where you're going. At least that's the way we're doing it in Old Saybrook and Madison. But it's that more instant. You don't have to plan it out in advance. You more travel. It's much more like an Uber or a Lyft. And the big difference is it's shared ride, instead of Uber or Lyft, where it's. But I've heard it equated to, as we work with Wesleyan, they're telling students it's like Uber Pool.
Yeah.
So that's probably the closest equivalent, except that ours is wheelchair accessible. It's a small service area, so you can't use it to go to Middletown, whereas you can on our dollar ride. In order to be able to be, on demand, we have to keep the service area smaller.
Okay.
So otherwise, you would need a lot of vehicles to try and get to that. Our goal is always to be around on that, try and keep our median wait time to 12 minutes. So in order to meet that, you got to keep the service area a little smaller. But it usually, like I said, it's worked out really well in Old Saybrook Madison. We're doing it a little differently in Middletown. We're going to have stops identified, so people will have to walk to stops. But it's really designed around Wesleyan, so that works for Wesleyan. The students can easily go and walk out to a stop. They'll still be close, but so we have the flexibility to do it multiple ways. You could do it designated stops if we had an area where that was our concern, or you could do it just any address within a service area.
Joe, if we decided to do this and then move forward on this, do you see a place for our buses, or especially our bus drivers?
Yeah, there's in the old, what was just the Ninetown area, we really were also doing the senior buses too. We were doing everything. But as we've taken on more towns like East Haddam, and Haddam, they still do run senior buses. Those towns have chosen to kind of stick to group trips. That's been their choice. They didn't want to do, or some of them, East Haddam also does trips outside the district. So East Haddam said, you know what, we're going to have you do everything inside the district. We're going to do outside the district. But as we get up in Middletown, yeah, they do have 2 senior buses, and they do some of their own transportation. But they're talking to us now about kind of some of the same arrangements where they're thinking maybe we just do group trips and we have you guys do more dial ride in town. It's really up to you. We've done it many ways. If you said you want to continue to do senior transportation the way you've done senior transportation in town, that's fine. You just want to have us do the further out stuff that's in our district still, but you guys don't go to today, that's fine. If you said something in between, if you just said, you know what, we want to use your software, we could give you access to our software. That's we have a significant investment in our scheduling software. I mean, at this point, it's a couple $100,000 into it, but it too has apps and phone call reminders, like your doctor's office calling you the night before, reminding you of your trips tomorrow, calling you when the bus is on the way. All those things. And so there's not one way to do it. There's a lot of different ways we can do it, and it's whatever you as town decide works best for the town of Madison.
Thank you.
And I will say that we've talked to our senior staff, senior center staff, about what is working really well for us and then where we could improve. So I think those conversations would continue. So they've had preliminary talks, and what's great is that there's a lot of flexibility here. Because we also have some decisions going forward. We're going to have to replace some of our buses. They're in the replacement plan for the next couple of years. We've had staffing shortages for our senior buses currently, which is a problem, I think, across the board. There's a lot of things that, we need to look at what service offerings and how we're doing it and what's the best way to do it to make sure that everybody gets what they need, including our seniors. We want to continue to encourage that. I will point out, and I apologize, I did not invite Sherry Cody up to join us, but she's been a key point person on a lot of this. But there's an economic development component to this as well, and also providing both helping our businesses and bringing people into town through public transit, but also workforce supply to our local businesses, which I know the Beach Hotel, for example, has had a lot of issues with that, where they've had to run their own buses to bring in workers from different locations. So the expansion of public transit would help our local businesses get more staff needs fulfilled to have other transportation options.
And I think that's one area where microtransit works well, or on demand, is as a first mile, last mile connector for train stations. That's really where we start in Old Saybrook, in the suburbs, because our problem in the suburbs is always you don't have a core downtown, right? You don't have one core that we could say, let's run a shuttle from the train station to this core. We don't have that. So the microtransit's great in that, Madison Beach Hotel is by pretty much nothing else, right? So the microtransit can connect it to the train station while also connecting, your industrial park over here. So you have more flexibility than you do on a shuttle, because you try and hit all those things with a shuttle, and now you have an hour wait for the shuttle to come back around, and that doesn't work either. So that's where the microtransit has been nice on that side. That's the only use. There's lots of uses of it. But that's been one really great use of it, is that people can just pull it up on the train. We've actually seen from our software provider where people open the app, and as soon as you look at the map, as soon as they pulled it up, they said that must be the train line. So yep, it is, because you could just see all the little opens coming as it comes into Old Saybrook. So you just pop it up, open the app on the train and book it, and maybe you have a 5-minute wait once you get off the train, and you get to wherever it is you need to go. So it's a great solution.
So I know that we're bumping, and Noreen, I know you had to leave soon, so I thought this was a good intro. Yep.
I canceled my meeting. I canceled out of my meeting, so I'm fine. Go forward.
Okay. Well, I just thought that maybe, obviously there seems to be a lot of support and interest in moving this forward in terms of, because, to dedicate some town staff to working closely to come up with an actual, what that proposal could possibly look like and the cost. I wanted to make sure that the board was supportive of doing that. There's no commitment,
Yeah.
but we at least can take the deeper dive and commit staff time to do this work.
And may I suggest we have the senior commission involved, either the liaison or whatever, to keep them informed, because this will change their program. I think for the better, but it is a change to their program. And I think it'd be really important to get one of the senior commissioners or a couple involved.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, this would pull in all the different appropriate departments, and then, discussions, they would have discussions with their commissions. This wouldn't be committing to anything right now, but it just come up with kind of a framework of how we might consider doing this. And it could be through phases. We start with phase 1, which is where we cherry pick a few services that we really think are critical right now, and then, evaluate after a period of time.
Peggy,
Just a
I
quick
wanted
question.
to thank
Go
you
ahead, Al.
for, I wanted to thank Joe for joining us this morning, and Peggy, I wanted to thank you for bringing this forward. I think in all my years as a selectman, I believe this is the first time I've heard about the district and thought about the policy implications.
It does open a lot of doors for us, so, which I think is great. Bruce, I know you had a question.
So 2 really, really quick questions. Joe, as you expand your service area, do your state and federal funds expand with that? So are you eligible for an increase in operating funds?
So yes and no, not automatically, but because in Connecticut, we are pretty much just one giant urbanized area, that just kind of bleeds into each other. So we split the funding with the various transit districts because there's more than one of us serving each urban area. So not necessarily by just our growth, but we do grow the overall pot of money coming into the state because revenue miles of service are one of the big parts of the formula on how federal funding comes to each metro area. But then the transit districts, because the state does the match, the state really ends up deciding a lot of how that money is then distributed to the districts. But we have a lot more influence as, number one, our larger size, and number two, the state really wanted to see transit districts combine because their perception of more efficiencies, and they want to deal with less transit districts. So we have been promised a lot of things because of our doing this. I mean, the first in the state to do it, there was legislation proposed in the last session using us as a model to force transit districts to do what we did, which isn't a good idea to force them. I mean, ours had a lot of study behind it, and the region makes sense. But I mean, we're already being seen as a model. Everyone, the state really wants and needs us to succeed. So we're definitely moving to the front of lines for funding. One example of that is that we are one of only 2 transit districts in the state included in the next round of funding for electric buses. So we'll be getting 2 electric buses ordered this summer, probably delivered in 2024 with the way current lead times are. But we moved right to the front of the line because of our merger. So we're definitely getting favored for a lot of things. Also, actually in the new what did come out of the legislature from that bill was a requirement that the district, the Department of Transportation, have a new merit-based kind of award, like some sort of competitive award system for operating funds that prefers districts that serve populations over 100,000, which we're one of only a few that do. So we supposedly should be getting now favored for new funding opportunities in statute now.
All right. The other question was, maybe Peggy or Joe, you know this, when having an asset gets to capacity and they start turning away visitors, are they directing them to one of the lots that you're servicing in the Park Connect?
I don't know if you know the answer this year, Peggy. I know what the answer was last year.
Yeah. We've requested that to happen. I don't know if that's necessarily happening. I feel like they need to be, we've talked about, this is a learning process because it's new, but no, right now they're not doing that, I don't think.
We were really hopeful. The initial talk was having it on the highway signs and everything, and then that didn't happen. Deep is a partner in this. It's not just DOT. It's a DOT Deep partnership to do this Park Connect. We're hoping that we keep saying that that's one of the things that should happen. I don't know if it's happening this year. I don't think you've had a capacity issue yet this year, though, right?
We've had at least one day, right?
Was there one?
Only, yeah, Memorial Day
closed.
weekend, there was one day that it closed, and but yes, we've had conversations with them that we've requested that. I will say it's just, you know, it's probably pretty chaotic when it gets full like that. And so, you know, then there's no communication, right? They're just shut out of the park completely. So, you know, the more that we can promote the plan itself in advance, and so people aren't even driving, I think that's the other thing. But I think it's a good point that we need to figure out a way to make it more not, you know, knowledge based. We talked about flyers at one point and things like that, but the way when they shut the park, you just can't even get in. You know, it's not like they're going through the gates where you can hand them something and then people turn around. It's more, they would have to be educating people about alternate parking.
Yeah, maybe it might be possible if we push to get DOT to get one of their signs there. Yeah, they got lots of those electronic signs.
Yeah, we've used ours, but usually it's to just alert people that the park is closed or so it's still a problem. We don't have a perfect answer yet, but I think it's important. The other thing is not just our shuttle, but also Clinton. You know, because that does go into Hammonasset as well. So there's so many different options for people to park elsewhere and take the shuttle in. And so that is just going to take public education.
Yeah, we got two pretty good sized parking lots in Madison that we're serving. So
yeah. And so one of the other things is that I know Sherry is working on trying to promote that through our social media as well. You know, to people to park there rather than trying to, you know, park in town. So we're trying to get the message out.
And one thing we were able to do too this year was get a stop at the campground because that was something that we really identified would be helpful. And so that might be an opportunity to get people that are at the campground that, you know, might not have another car there. You know, if they brought a trailer, not a trailer, but a camper, they don't have a car with them, to get them out of the park and come into town to go dining, shopping, whatever. So
yeah, and I think Sherry was going to work with the chamber of putting some sort of literature together for people that were visiting the campground, at least to know what was available in Madison and that shuttle service was available to them. So, because last year they would have had to have walked all the way to West Beach, or I forget where the stop is.
Middle Beach.
Middle Beach. I mean, and that's a kind of a long haul. So it does help there.
May I ask one question, Peggy? Just curious, in past years we've discussed with Ninetown Transit. Are you actually called Ninetown Transit? What's your new name?
Well, we don't have it yet, but it will change. We'll have the new name probably by October.
Okay. You mentioned in one of the meetings I was at, Guilford. What's the status of that? Are you still talking to Guilford, or is Guilford going in a different direction?
So Sherry is actually a good source for that as well. So I know she's still kind of, but she's, you know, the beauty of the shared position is that we can all share good ideas. And I know that Sherry has been having the same kinds of conversations with Guilford as well.
Good morning. Joe, thank you so much for being here today and having this conversation with the board. And to answer your question, yes, I am interested in expanding Estuary Transit District's service into Guilford as well. It's a different conversation at the moment. We're doing more of an analysis of what we have currently, because there's also the Greater New Haven Transit District, I think is
Okay.
what it's called. And yes, we will be bringing Joe to talk to the board here as well, to talk about expansion. I think it just makes sense if we can get Madison and Guilford both on his routes. And as I mentioned in the chat a few minutes ago, getting the commuters to and from the train station is really exciting to me, to be able to use our train stations better and having that access.
Good, thank
And I
you.
think that's, in Guilford, that's really, Guilford's train station is located not in the center of town, so it could be really helpful there as well.
Sherry, are there any specific next steps that you might be recommending to the selectmen?
For Madison?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Peggy mentioned it a few minutes ago, and that's just coming up with some suggestions from working with Joe on what expansions, expanded service we could have in Madison, and then the cost associated with that. So happy to work with Joe and come up with some suggestions for you.
So we'll continue this conversation, but obviously a lot of interest, and I think it really does tick a lot of boxes for the things that we're trying to do right now in Madison. So thank you for your time, and Sherry for
Happy to
your
be here.
efforts. And I know our town planner has also been working on this as well. So it'll be good to have like the team now really focus on the next steps. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Unfortunately, Scott had to leave he had to go to his real job. I think for something that came up, we're running a lot to talk about this morning. So with that, we'll move on to item number 9 on the agenda. Discuss and take action to approve the hiring of Katie Marino to the position of Assistant Assessor located within the Assessor's Office. The position is non-union, rate of pay is grade 12, step 1, $32.64 per hour. The position is budgeted, not requiring appropriation of funds. This position vacancy was created by a resignation.
So moved.
Okay. All right, any questions? So this is just, we've had some turnover in that office, and we're excited that we can bring somebody new in. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Motion passes. Okay, next item is discuss and take action to approve a donation from Neighbor to Neighbor in the amount of $5,000 for camp scholarships pending Board of Finance approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. Once again, Neighbor to Neighbor steps up. We're so grateful for all the support, and this is an important thing to get moved forward since it's camp time. So any additional questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, with thanks very much. Motion passes. Item number 11, discuss and take action. And here I was sent that there needed to be an adjustment to this
Yes.
line item. So I'm going to read the new amount. Discuss and take action to approve routine line item transfers totaling $89,728.60.
So moved.
Okay, great. And I'm going to invite, because this popped into my email as well. There was a change in this number. Is Stacy on?
She is.
Okay, great. Okay, Stacy, you're.
I lost
Good
my
morning.
papers because I've been listening the whole time trying to multitask, so I lost I lost my papers.
It's been a long 2 hours, so.
So in addition to the 2 that you had with the insurance and public works, we and some other small ones, registrars, we added some line transfers for salaries. Again, year-end reconciliation, we had additional funds in various lines. So we took advantage of that and moved it into 2 places, one to salary adjustments and one to the severance account. We have some big payments coming out. We have 2 people that will be done that we're going to have to issue a severance. So we thought put money into the severance reserve in order to cover those payments. And as you know, those funds will roll forward to next year in case we have a similar situation.
Any additional questions?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, Okay, great, thank you. Discuss item number 12, discuss and take action to approve changes to the 2021-2020, actually, there should be 2022-2023 board liaison assignments.
It's,
Is it?
yeah, so it's 21 to 23. You guys make a block
Oh, for 2
2-year
years.
liaison.
Oh, yeah,
So,
okay.
yeah, for your whole term.
Thinking
So-
about the budget, okay. Yep, okay, can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, great. And these were the, I think, circulated by email of the liaison assignment. So any other discussion on that? No? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, motion passes. Next item on the agenda is, can I get a motion to accept the resignation with regret of Mark Steffen from the Economic Development Commission?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And thank you, Mark, for your service. Appreciate it. And sorry, you cannot continue on the commission. Item number 14. I don't have this in front of me. So do we have any abatements or refunds?
We do have a small amount. I'll move $1,726.08.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, great. Item number 15, any citizens' comments?
There are none.
With that.
Move we adjourn.
10:21. Motion to adjourn. Second. Okay, all in favor, say aye. All right, great,
Aye.
thank you. But good discussion today. I think a lot of exciting things to look forward to. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.